Again, my name is Terry Peer, and I am humbled to be here tonight in front of you as your host and moderator. I just want to thank FAE for putting on this Midwest Sportsman's Classic and Cloverleaf for sponsoring this event, two class act organizations that have truly changed the hunting industry tonight. We talk about this on the podcast tonight. Not only does the hunting community need tonight, the hunting industry needs tonight. You know, people my age were raised in this environment where hunting was entertainment. Tonight, you all get to hear views, opinions, maybe even a little bit of friendly debate and banter from the pioneers of people who perfected and understood what chasing mature whitetail is about. Who's ready for that? Come on, let me hear you. I sat over here and I heard you guys yelling at the lumberjacks, and if we're not louder than them over there, something's wrong. Let me hear you again. Come on. That's more like it. So I want to start talking just a little bit about these participants. In 1994, my grandfather came to visit me, and I was just getting into deer hunting, and I popped this VHS tape into our VCR. And I said, hey, Granddaddy, watch this. This guy's sitting on the ground with a 220-inch deer coming up at his face, shoots him at 4 yards with a bow. Isn't this awesome? You know what he said? It's fake. If you want to learn what a mature whitetail is, you need to go find the Wensel brothers. Find their tapes, find their DVDs, even the cassette tapes. Remember those boys? And from then on, that was my pursuit of mature whitetails. Give it up for the Wensel brothers, everybody. Bobby Worthington right here. I want to tell everybody in this room, if you want to learn how to hunt big woods and hill country, you need to give this man a call. You need to find every piece of literature that's out there on what to do in big woods and hill country. He is the best in the business. He's the best that ever was. Give Bobby Worthington a round of applause. You know, I tend to collect things. Some things are not very important. But one of the most precious gifts that I was ever given was this envelope that had every printed article that Al Foster ever wrote. He's become one of my friends. He's become one of my mentors and one of the men that I look up to the most. Give it up for my friend Al Foster. As you all know, I spend a lot of time with the next guy. And I'm humbled to always be in the presence. There's no other deer hunter in the industry that has done what he has done on small properties. There's people that kill big deer. There's people that manage properties, but no one is doing what he is doing on small properties. Don Higgins. Give him. About 3 years ago, I had a meeting in Peoria, Illinois with a guy that I'd never met, didn't know anything about. He was coming out with this new camo line that had an unbelievable pattern that we'd heard about, but I'd never seen it in person. He comes in and we lay all these garments out on the table, and I saw a backpack, and I fell in love with the backpack. Then I picked up a hoodie. Then I picked up a set of bibs. One man has changed the industry in the garment apparel for whitetail hunters because he is a whitetail hunter. The man travels all over the world. He's trained in Africa. He is a stone cold killer. Everybody get up for Joe Miles. So the format is very simple tonight. It's going to go off the rails. I can tell you already. It doesn't matter what the format is. We're going to start this off in 3 different segments, talking about the past to the future, where we are currently. We're going to also spend some time talking about some techniques and tips that these guys have developed and perfected over the years. And then my most important and favorite segment tonight is the future of our industry. And what I want, especially the young people in this room, is take notice, listen. These men started doing what they were doing for the love of the game, for the integrity of the sport, not for financial gain, not for publicity, but for the wildlife and the habitat that they live in. Are you guys excited for tonight? All right, so we're going to go around the horn right now. I'm going to call it the horn since there's no table really here. But we're going to start. I want you to give just a quick intro of you. Talk about why hunting's important, where you started, just a couple minutes, and we'll go around the room.
Thank you. Barry and I'll speak for the both of us because we're twins and we grew up together. We started shooting arrows. I can't remember how old we were, but we weren't very old. But here we are pushing 80 years old and we haven't put our toys away yet. But I want to say something about what hits me first is hunting is not a sport. A lot of people think it's a sport. Baseball, basketball, football, hockey, those are sports. Golf, tennis, pool, bowling, those are games. Hunting is none of those. It's not a game, it's not a sport. It's 100% instinct. We are born to hunt. You take a little kid and put him in diapers, can't even walk yet. Put a turtle or a frog out in front of him and he'll stalk it. We're born to hunt. It's in our genes. You know, it's something that we do because it's part of our makeup. You know, I can't even begin to tell you what hunting means to me. I talk a lot, and guys will say, yeah, I hunt, you know, and I like to hunt. Well, I like to hunt too, but I love to hunt. You know, I like to fish, but I love to hunt. And man is a predator. You know, we were born with an instinct to sneak up on stuff and hunt it, to get food. There's only the types of predators. You know, you got canines, felines, raptors, scavengers, you know, birds of prey and all that sort of thing. But the type of animals that are out there, we're hunting as an instinct. 100, it's no different. It's no different than eating, sleeping, breathing, reproducing, fighting, surviving, farming. Farming is an instinct, you know. Anyway, they're all instincts of human beings that are out. You got a couple of farmers here grinning. Anyway, it's an instinct that's inbred in it. It's natural. There's nothing wrong. We don't have to feel guilty about picking up a tool.
You're not apologizing, are you?
Huh?
You're not apologizing, are you?
No, I'm not going to. I never. You know.
Barry, introduce yourself
I was
here.
going to say, let me take it over. Is this mic working okay? I'm questioning some of the equipment here. I want to say, like, these lights, you guys out there can't tell. They're really bright in my eyes, and now I know what the buck felt like that Don Higgins got last year right before he pulled the trigger. I made that up, by the way. You know, but anyway, I just wanted to say, as far as our age, as we have gotten older, when Gene and I started hunting as young boys, etc., we did stuff that, you know, normal boys did. And as we got older, we got more. And our dad was an avid whitetail hunter, but he disciplined us all the time and pointed us in the right direction, and we were blessed to be able to learn and still have the freedom to go out and do that. But as we've gotten older, I've noticed that as the years pass, the new generations are losing it, and I'm sorry to say it, but it's scary anymore that the younger kids, we've been teaching them, and it's our fault. We've been teaching them that it's faster, and they think the only way of shooting a big buck is to sit in a shooting house over a food plot, and that's fine, you know, et cetera. But I also want them to get in the woods. I want to develop the family bond where Gramps and Dad go out in the woods, take the kids out there, and point out the woodsmanship skills, showing them the more you put into something, the more you'll get out of it. But we need to all enjoy the whitetail. The whitetail is one of the best, greatest things that God gave us to enjoy, and we need to have reverence and respect for the white-tailed deer. And
I'm glad you talked about that, because we have a whole segment on the future of that where I want you to circle back to that.
Good.
So, Bobby, why don't you introduce yourself just real quick?
I'm Bobby Worthington from Pikeville, Tennessee, southeastern Tennessee.
When'd you get into hunting, buddy? You got to be a little bit more than that. They just talked for 15 minutes.
I hunted all my life.
Say something about the light in Don's eyes. Say something about the lights in Don's eyes, you know.
I don't have to. I paid you to say that. I grew up squirrel hunting and rabbit hunting. There wasn't a lot of whitetail where I lived when I grew up. There was some on wildlife managed areas, and my daddy would travel to Cumberland County's plateau, the Cumberland Plateau, to some remote areas and deer hunt. But I grew up squirrel and rabbit hunting, and it was all gun hunting. Then we got to watching Fred Bear on the American Sportsmen TV show. It was narrated by Kirk Gowdy, and they had skin and other things, but about once a month they'd have Fred Bear hunting elephant and grizzly bear and stuff all over the world, promoting his bear archery company. And then Ben Pearson hunted on it a few times too. And then white-tailed deer got to be plentiful, and enough on private ground to hunt. And I got to thinking, I never will. I feel cheated. I never will have the finances or be able to travel all over the world and hunt like Fred Bear and kill elephants and stuff like that. And then when I got to hunting the white-tailed deer later on, I realized I was hunting the #1 prey animal in the world, the most difficult animal in the world to kill. So that's really fueled my passion for him when I understood how hard a mature buck was to kill.
Awesome. Al, how about you? You want to introduce yourself to everybody and talk about how you got into hunting?
First, I just want to tell Barry he's paying the price for that short-billed hat tonight. These are better. You don't blind you as bad.
Oh yeah, I can't.
You don't have enough bills.
Yeah, no. I when I was a kid, I was known to wear the hat crooked. It's technique. Here, hold that sec. It's technique to put the hat on. You gotta put it on straight like this, and then lock it, type of thing. You know. But everybody thinks the reason is, so when I draw my bowstring, the bowstring doesn't hit the bill of the hat, but it's not really. The real reason is it fakes out the deer. The deer think you're looking that way.
All right, back to you, Al.
I gotta correct you. The hat's on straight, the head's on crooked.
I'm Alan Foster. I was one of those kids that was lucky enough to have a dad that was passionate about hunting and fishing. I grew up in central Illinois. We didn't have any deer, so we hunted pheasants and rabbits and squirrels and all that stuff. He started me out. I'll never forget. I wanted to, when can I shoot a gun? When can I go? He'd take me everywhere, but he wouldn't let me carry a gun until I got older. And we had this little Stevens single shot 410, had a little bitty hammer on it. And he told me, he said, Al, he said, when you can pull that hammer back and let it down, then you can go hunting with me. I was in 7th grade before I could pull the hammer back. I was a little guy. 7th grade before I could pull the hammer back on that gun. But what he didn't realize, by making me wait that long, he had created a monster, because I was foaming at the mouth to go, and there was no holding me back. So I got into that, and I started trapping when I was in 8th grade, and I trapped till I was in my early 20s. As while I was on my trap line one year, the deer had started showing up, but they'd opened a bow season up a year or two before, and I hadn't got into it. It just didn't think too much about it, but I was running my trap line, and I saw 3 big deer that fall. And I thought, man, that looks like fun. And I'd always been a reader. I'd read everything from Africa to all of it, and it was all great. But the whitetails, that's when they got in my blood. And the next year, I went out and had a buddy that had bow hunted a little bit. We built a stand out of plywood and 2x4s. And the first deer that walked by me was a 3.5-year-old 11-point buck, and I killed that deer. And that was opened the door for me, and it was like, man, I am going to hunt big bucks. That's what I wanted to do. We got one tag back in those days, so I wasn't interested in little bucks or does. I wanted to hunt big bucks, and that's a big step to take when you don't know what's going on too much. But these two guys here started writing some articles at that time, and Roger Rothar, and I got a hold of those, and that opened the door. That's all I had to do was get those articles, because I knew enough about the outdoors and the woods that they put it there in front of me and laid it out, and it's like, let's go for it, and I did. So that's how I got my started hunting, and my success to big whitetail bucks. I mean, it's these guys over here and the other guys at that time that were riding. So that's what.
Well, speaking of big bucks, we'll move on to.
Here comes payback.
Yeah, it's my
Here
turn now,
comes-
buddy.
It's gonna fly the other direction, boys. Get ready. Don Higgins.
Yeah, so I grew up in central Illinois, small town. I grew up with that instinct that Gene talked about. The outdoors just drew me in from the time I was a little kid. And I hunted and fished and trapped for everything that there was a season for around my home. And then I was about 13 years old, and I told my dad I wanted to go deer hunting. And deer tags were kind of hard to get at that time in Illinois, but we applied. I got a tag, and I didn't kill a deer until the third season when I was 16 years old, November 16th, 1979. Never forget that morning. Shot my first buck. When I walked up on that deer, I knew what God put me on the planet for. And even though I was only 16, by the time I was 20, I'd given up all other outdoor interest. I quit small game hunting, quit fishing, quit everything. I was trapping at the time, quit trapping just to focus on chasing big deer. Well, I was probably about 18, 19 years old, and I met this guy right beside me, Al Foster, at a new job that I was working. And this guy was doing what I dreamed of doing. He was shooting big deer and doing it on a consistent basis. And, every time I got a break from my job, I'd run over to Al, and we would draw out maps on rolls of paper at the printing factory where we worked. And he taught me more that first year than I'd known, my entire hunting career at that point. In fact, the season before I met Al, I met him in the summer, to the next season, the number of bucks I seen from a stand tripled in just one season. It was all from this guy. Well, Al introduced me to the Wensel brothers. That's where he was getting a lot of his information. I started writing letters to Gene especially. And I remember I was still a teenager, and I'm writing handwritten letters to my hero. And he would always write back. Within a week or two, I'd get a handwritten letter back in the mail. And I don't think he realizes the impact that he had on me all these years later. And to think that today that I'd get to be on the same stage with three of these guys that had such an impact on me when I was a kid is really just unbelievable. And then a few years later, it was January of 1987, I was at the first ever Buckmasters Deer Classic. I don't know if you guys remember the Buckmasters Classics they used to have. And they invited in all these celebrities and such, and somehow I got picked to go. But Buckmasters was new at the time, and I think they only had about 3 members, and I was one of them. So I got picked to go, and we're down at this big lodge in Haynesville, Alabama. And the upstairs of this lodge, there was a big old long hallway, and on both sides of that hallway there was bedrooms. And the bedroom that I was staying on was at the very end of this hallway on one side, and right on the other side at the end of the hallway was the Wensel brothers, in there. And man, I was just a kid in heaven. Here's my 2 heroes right across the hall from me. And man, I was running back and forth to their room and stuff, and it was just like, a young musician meeting Elvis for the first time. And here's these guys staying in the room right across from me.
You were stealing he was stealing our junk food, what he was doing.
I tell you what, before that week was over, though, and this is a true story, folks. I promise you this is a true story. These guys know where I'm going with it, too. Before that week was over, my heart was broken because I found out they had a naked man in their room. True story.
Moving on.
You're not going to
drop it right there.
True story.
We'll drop that one where
no
it's
pun
at.
intended. You're not going to let them
Go.
hanging, are you?
No, we're leaving it at that. You'll have to defend your honor later.
True story.
You'll have plenty of mic time before it's over, I promise.
We better not go
Well,
any
as the
further than
spring
that.
chicken of the group up here, Joe Miles, talk a little bit about yourself and your journey thus far.
I don't really know how to follow up naked men, so I'm going to have to think for a minute on what I'm going to talk about. I grew up in South Carolina, a little different. A lot of these guys, Midwest. I really don't know life without deer hunting. My father was an absolute savage, just a whitetail fanatic. He one time had the 11th biggest whitetail killed in the state of South Carolina. My earliest memory of whitetail hunting, I can remember waking up in a sleeping bag, having no idea where I was, and coming out of the sleeping bag, and I was in the middle of the woods and scared to death, 3, 4 years old, and a piece of candy hit me in the top of the head. And I look down and I pick up this candy and I look up, and my dad's perched up on a limb with his rifle hunting. And he took me every time he went, and it was just part of my life. I don't know life without deer hunting. And 5 years old, shot my first deer with his help. 12 years old, he kind of turned me to the wolves and let me make all my own mistakes. And it's just been a huge part of my life forever. And just having the opportunity to sit here with you guys is just unbelievable. I appreciate it. I'm humbled to be here, and just thank y'all for everything you've done, teaching guys the right way to do things. And, we're going to get into this in a little bit about the instant gratification of kids nowadays, but just the woodsmanship that if people will listen to how you do it, how you set the base, and then improve on that, it's just very humbling to be sitting here with you gentlemen, and thank y'all for including me.
Give this panel a round of applause, guys. Again, we want to thank our sponsor from Cloverleaf. We're going to start our first segment tonight, and we're going to start with Gene. This first question is for you. How has hunting mature bucks since the innovation of compound bows, crossbows, and using rifles become an arsenal of today's deer hunter, and how do you feel about it?
Times have changed, as long as I've been in this, it's just, I see, and it's not really a problem, but society has changed, these youngsters, and God love them, we need to get them in the woods, but too many of them, their idea of hunting and teaching, and learning is getting out there and just put me in a good spot. They're skipping the apprenticeship too often. The apprenticeship, the woodsmanship. They want to put me in a good spot, and then next thing you know, they're doing one of these things, playing with their phones and whatever. But they're losing the ability, not losing it, but they're not getting the appreciation of the outdoors is God's work of art. It's just, that's the way it is. But these youngsters, and it's, again, it's usually their parents or grandparents, but we need to get them, get in the woods, get in the woods and ask yourself questions. How come that deer did that? Or why did that deer do that? Or how's that work? And is that the right thing? And be observant. But anyway, as far as the tools are concerned, I take tools. Barry and I have always shot bows and arrows from little kids, and we never put our toys away, like I said. But bows have changed, and again, matter of fact, I'll be honest with you, I've never shot a compound bow in my life. I pulled one back, or pulled a couple back, I think, many years ago, without an arrow on it, and I never, when it broke over, it didn't feel right. It feels like somebody shooting pool, and you're just getting ready to take the shot, and somebody comes up and bumps you. It broke my rhythm or concentration. It's just not for me. Some of my best friends, most of my best friends, hunt with compounds. The crossbows, I'm not really familiar with them. The crossbows, here again, I think I don't have, and I'm going to be honest, I don't have a problem if a guy's disabled with shooting a crossbow. But I want to get it's an arrow launching device. It's not really a bow as far as I'm concerned, but I want to get the deer close. I want to get them, last fall I could have killed, I say could have, I had opportunities to shoot at 2 really good bucks, both over 160 inches. One was about 35 yards and the other was about 40 yards, and it's too far for me. My limit's I want them inside the 20-yard line, inside, I mean, I murder at 20 feet, I want them close. And part of the challenge is getting them into close range, And with the recurve bow, it works just fine for me. It just, as I get older, I'm using a lighter bow. But that's how I roll, But seeing, you want to interject something?
I was just going to interject the same thing, or similar to what he's saying, in the respect, it seems like recently it's the guys are whatever you want to say, bragging about how far their shots are, I mean, I shot an antelope at 64 yards or whatever, and I'm the other way around. In other words, I think we need to try to get as close as we can. I got, in my vendor's booth out there, I got 2 banners of nice whitetail bucks that I've killed. I didn't put those up, to brag about them. They're not my biggest bucks. I put them up, to explain the fact I shot them all with a recurve bow, and I shot them all at under 15 yards. Not on bait piles, not in enclosures, just out in the wild doing and whitetail bucks. I try to set my shots up for 20 yards or less, mostly 15 yards. And I'm saying, to me, that benefits, I think, most guys, most gals, most bow hunters are better shots at 15 yards or 18 yards than they are at 35 or 45 yards type of thing. So the whole point is get your target in, and you will have less wounding effect, and you'll have higher success rate and stuff. Plus, it's more personal satisfaction, so forth. But anyway.
Well, I can tell you I'm going to call dibs on an arrow launching device. Trademark. I'll have T-shirts by next year's Shipshewana. Al, I want you to chime in on this a little bit from your perspective. As these weapons have continued to evolve, we're going to talk more about technology later, but what's your viewpoint as you look at the industry from kind of the side angle and see where it started when you were a kid to where it is now? How do you feel about this arsenal of weapons that people have that they're using in the woods today?
When they first started archery for whitetails, muzzleloaders for whitetails, it's supposed to be a close range sport. The bows, I mean, that's what it's all about. It's about being close. But ever since they started the seasons, they've been trying to reinvent the rifle. I mean, look at what they've done with the longbows, recurves, then you go to compounds, and you go to the high-tech compounds, then you go to the crossbow. Now you got double-barrel crossbows. The same thing with muzzleloaders. You had your real primitive muzzleloaders, which was what the seasons were made for, and now they've got muzzleloaders out there shoot 200-300 yards. Shotguns the same way. They've improved the bullets. They've improved arrows. I'm not going to say they improved broadheads because they didn't do that, but anyway.
We'll talk about that, don't worry.
But whitetail bucks aren't supposed to be easy. A mature whitetail buck, he's the top of the line. I mean, he's the top challenge in the archery world, and it's supposed to be a close range sport. And you can shoot one out at 50 yards or 40 yards. The other thing I wanted to mention with the whitetails are nervous creatures. They're quick. They react quick. You get them close, they're not near as quick to jump the string. You can make that shot at 15, 18 yards, put it where you want it. The farther out you go, all he's got to do is twitch, and you hit him wrong. And that's not right. But a big whitetail buck, with a bow, man, you can shoot him out at 40 yards, and I'm sure that's heart pounding. When you get one at 15 yards, 18 yards, that's a whole different type of adrenaline rush, whole different type of challenge, and a whole different type of accomplishment when you do it. That's what I think about that.
How about you, Bobby?
You know, the legendary chief Sitting Bull said, when there are no buffalo, we will hunt mice because we are hunters. If you're a hunter, fellas, it don't matter if you've got a rifle, a crossbow, a compound bow, or a recurve. Because a true hunter is not betting on luck. All of us on this stage could make it happen no matter what's in our hand, because we know where the deer will be standing when we kill it, because we're woodsmen and we're hunters, and we'll set up where we need to set up for whatever weapon we're using. So rifle or shotgun, compound, crossbow don't affect a true hunter, because we can do the same. Our shots are going to be 15 yards if we want them to, because we're true hunters. We're not betting on luck, and that's what woodsmanship's all about.
Joe, as someone who traveled all over the world and trained in Africa, what do you think about what Bobby just said?
Oh, I agree 100% with that. I mean, my thing is, where does it stop, right? Where do these weapons stop? You know, we've gone so far to the right of it, and the seasons haven't caught up with it, right? So when the muzzleloader season was set, when the archery season was set, you know, that was years and years ago, and the seasons haven't kept up with the improvements of the weapon. I mean, you've got crossbows now that you can literally kill a deer at 100 yards with. Where it used to be muzzleloaders, you couldn't kill a deer at 100 yards with a muzzleloader, right? Because that was a challenge, so the season was set up for that. So I think that's really, really lacking. I mean, it does become an ethics thing, and we could go down that rabbit hole of ethics and you know, what every man wants to do and what he thinks is ethical, but I'll stick to topic on the weapon, and I think that's what's got to be evaluated, is how we've set our seasons up. If a guy wants to shoot a modern crossbow, that's fine, but that's more like a muzzleloader 15 years ago.
Don, I want you to elaborate on that season comment, because you've talked about this on Chasing Giants a lot, not as much about the weapon, but the season aligning with that weapon. Talk a little bit about that before we move to the next spot.
Well, you know, I actually could put a different spin on this whole conversation, because I think the advancement in equipment has actually made for poorer deer hunters, because we've got guys that are trying to make up for their lack of woodsmanship and their lack of hunting skills by increasing the yardage that they could shoot. And you know, in today's hunting industry, I'm probably considered one of the radicals. But really, I'm a disciple of the Wensels, because they are who I looked up to when I was younger. It's a game of how close can you get, not how far you can shoot. And, you know, I think that there's too many deer hunters out there that are trying to improve their success through their equipment instead of their woodsmanship skills.
Great point. All right, we're going to move to the second question, Barry. Of all the big bucks that you've killed, which one is the most meaningful of your life thus far?
Probably, excuse me, probably without hesitation, I would say I shot a buck in 2011. 2 years prior to that, I had a shot at, it was a non-typical, and he was within range, broadside, and halfway down his body there was a horizontal branch. And I knew if I hit below the branch, I was going to hit the deer too low. So I thought I'd just kiss the branch, you know, and I'd get it right above it and get in the lungs and stuff. Well, I kissed it all right, and the arrow went ricocheting off. So that deer became my primary target for the next couple years. And I specifically hunted him. I passed up some really nice bucks trying for him. I named the deer Hurley because when that arrow went up over the top of his back, I felt like hurling, you know. So at any rate, 2 years later, I was in a stand with intentions of shooting after Hurley, and I actually backed out of the area to try to let it cool off. I thought I might be pressuring him a little bit too much, but at any rate, this buck comes walking up, another buck comes walking up, and it ended up he was a Boone and Crockett 4x4. And he stood broadside at 14 yards, looked the other way, and I lost control, you know. So I ended up tagging him, but I only had one tag. Then I saw Hurley like 5 times later that year, kept pursuing him. Finally, the next year, actually Gene and I were walking in the morning, and I had showed Gene a fresh scrape that I just found, and he had a trail camera in his pack type of thing, just happened to be in there. And we were running late, it was dark, but we were heading in, and he just set it on the ground and kind of aimed it towards the overhead branch on his scrape as we came out. And we didn't see a deer that, if I remember right. Yeah, you didn't see a deer?
I took the camera on, I turned it on and laid it on the ground and just propped it up at this overhead, right next to the scrape. No screwing in a tree.
Yeah, but my point was we didn't see a deer. We hunted till whatever noon, never saw a deer. Either one of us came out and he pulled the camera and I pulled the SD card on it, and sure enough, I couldn't see his head, but I knew it was him. You know, he was there, so I knew I needed to get a stand in there, and I put all the pieces together. And this is, in my opinion, the fun part of this, is trying to figure out what he did. And that ended up being, I saw him cross. It was an old skid road there. I saw him cross there 3 different times, and I put all the pieces of the puzzle together, and I figured out that he was making a circuit, bedding on a ridge behind me. And I've preached for years about I would rather have a mediocre tree in a great spot than a great tree in a mediocre spot. But he was making a loop, coming down, bringing his finger ridge up and so forth. Finally, I was waiting for a southwest wind, and the first, let me say this too, the first hard frost of the morning of the season. I don't care if you're I mean, you need to beg, borrow, or steal your boss, whatever. The first morning of the first hard frost is always one of the best days of hunting of the year type of thing. Well, that morning happened to be that. I set this stand, as I said, it was a mediocre tree, but I did a lot of manipulation, which I tend to do to shift their movement where I want them to be. I want them to be at 14 yards, basically. That's my primary shot. Anyway, I shifted everything around, and that morning I ended up, it was that cold, hard frost, and don't hold me to the figures, but I think I saw 7 racked bucks and 30 does. I mean, they were chasing. I passed up a 150. It walked right underneath of me. They were chasing and running. It was absolutely a great day of hunting, all right? But I did not see Hurley. So, and I do this very rarely, but everything was so perfect, and I didn't see my target, but I went ahead and backed out. Just came in the next morning, and it went from the first hard frost. The next day, the temperature went up. In fact, it ended up 81 degrees that afternoon. But I climbed in a tree, and I never saw a deer. He was the first one that came through, whatever, 8:30, 8:40 in the morning. And I watched him rub a tree, and he walked right up. He did exactly what I had thought he was going to do. He got right there and gave me a broadside shot, and I got him, type of thing. The deer ended up, he scored 191, and he field dressed 248 inches and stuff. But it's always been one of my favorites because of how it happened. It was a dozen or 15 pieces of the puzzle had to all fall into place and stuff. And when that happens, there isn't any better hunting experience, in my opinion, in the woods.
That's a giant.
Pardon?
I said that's a giant.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to regret this because it's going to put us way behind schedule, but I love this question. So we're going to go around the horn, and all of us are going to answer that same question. We just have to keep it fairly short. Of all the big bucks you've ever killed, Bobby, which one stands out and why?
Well, there's no doubt about this. In October 2012, my baby son Clay told me, he said, "Daddy, I want to hunt down and kill a trophy myself, and I want you to be with me and video me." And I said, "That'd be great." And we found a huge track and got some pictures of a big deer that we ended up naming Andre the Giant. So he was really excited about it. And I videoed him on 2 or 3 occasions. He nearly got a shot at the deer, but it was out of range and a couple of times, and something else happened. right at the end of the season, we seen him again, and Clay turned to me and said, "Dad, I want to kill that big deer next year, and I want to kill it with my recurve." He had ordered him a tall tine recurve. And I said, "That's straight, son." And I believed he would. And on April 17th, 2013, he died in a flash flood. And after that, and I realized something that never really dawned on me, but there's not a more devastating blow a human being can suffer than the loss of a child. And as hunting season approached, I got to thinking about my season and thinking about Andre. And I went to his mother and his brother, and I said, "Have you ever known Clay to tell a lie?" And neither one of them could remember it, and I told them, I said, "I can't either." And I said, "He'd said he'd kill that deer with that bow." And I said, "I'm going to have to do it for him, but he's going to do it through me." So Andre come through, and I put an arrow through his heart with Clay's recurve. And I turned over to the stand beside me where Clay had already stood. And I said, a tear started filling my eyes, and I said, I now know that a demon can't be killed with an arrow. So that's the deer that will never leave my mind.
What a special story. Thank you for sharing that with us. I think we'll move on to the next one. I don't know that we can beat that story. Is that all right with you guys? All right. Can you come back with another answer to another question now? Technology is incorporated. We talked about it a little bit earlier, but I want to shift this one from the equipment to trail cameras. Now, as you've seen your career go through the years, trail cameras have started from the old days where it was just telling us when the deer crossed the trail to having 35 millimeter film in it. Now to the point where cell cameras can give you intel for tens, hundreds, even thousands of miles away. How do you see that in the industry, and how do you feel about it personally?
I look at it just like Don said about the bows. The technology helps hunters that don't know woodsmanship to kill more deer. Me and Barry and Gene and probably Alan and Don, before they were even trail cameras, was killing giant deer. We found a way to do it. Of course, we were measuring the tracks and getting where we could identify the tracks and following their sign. We didn't need trail cameras. Fellas, success in any field has more to do with the individual than the equipment he has, than the coach he has, than the way he does a thing. You can look at Olympic archery. The Olympic archer standing up there, the best in the world, has different bows, and they've got different techniques. It more lies in the individual than in the equipment or the coach or the way he learns the thing or the technique he uses. It's passion, it's work ethics, it's knowing your own ability, it's having confidence in yourself. Other than the fact that we are accountable beings, the discovery of our own potential, I think, is the single most greatest event in our lives. It will allow us to move forward without doubting, without wavering, without flinching. And that's what I feel about. I feel it's more the individual. We all, if they took trail cameras away from us today, every one of us would continue to kill giant bucks.
I'm going to skip over to Joe on this question. You're the young pup. I called you the spring chicken earlier. But the reason I'm going to shift this to you is out of all of my friends or acquaintances in this industry, you are the biggest gear junkie I've ever met. And that goes of every piece of your equipment, not just your bows. But talk a little bit about the evolution in your lifetime of trail cameras, where they've come, and where you feel comfortable with where the end is.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's an ethical thing to me, and try to lighten the mood a little bit. You know, your ethics are going to fall between literally going naked, walking to the woods, and using your teeth and claws to kill an animal. That would be the fairest possible way to do it, right? Nobody could, I mean, if you do it that way, that is the absolute most ethical, most savage, most down-to-earth way you could do it. The other end of the spectrum is a 50-acre high fence with a 300 Win mag and not a tree in the place, right? That's still legal. Guys do that. but is that ethical, right? So everybody falls to me in between those two parts. Trail cameras are legal, right? Trail cameras, text cameras, I use them. I think they've done a lot for trophy deer and telling people what trophies are in an area. Certainly me with traveling, they're a huge tool that I use. Kansas, Illinois, Ohio, Texas, wherever it is, it really helps me know what I'm going after, when I need to go there. So it's a big tool. But just like Bobby said, if you took all that away, there's still got to be a base of woodsmanship and understanding. And we're going to get into kids and that sort of stuff, down the road. But establishing that base of woodsmanship and how to kill deer naturally, and then adding the bells and whistles to improve your craft. That's what I do personally. And my dad brought me up that way. We didn't have trail cameras. We had scrapes, rubs, edges, big swamp country, hard hunting, a lot of pressure in the state of South Carolina, and we didn't have any of that. And so establish the base and then add the bells and whistles to hone your craft. But, like Bobby said, it's the woodsmanship is, I see a trend. Obviously I'm in the tech group of hunters and like you said, all the gear and gadgets, and I'm immersed in that, especially with my company, and I see guys starting to go back. Guys are starting to shoot recurves. They're starting to go back to, hey, no trail cameras. We're only hunting public land, whatever it may be. So we're starting to see it go back because I do believe it's gotten to a tipping point. It's certainly not easy, but if you've got a 300 feet per second bow with a great mechanical broadhead and trail cameras, I mean, you can kill deer pretty easily, right? So I know we're going to get into all that. But anyway, that was a long way of saying it becomes an ethical thing.
Well, it's a great segue as we finish up segment one, which was supposed to talk the past to the present, where we have gone as you guys first took to the woods to kind of where we are now. I'm going to go off script a little bit because, when Derek asked me to hold a microphone, I'm never going to do what he tells me to do. But as we finish up this segment, Al and I were talking a little bit earlier from when we're talking about past to present, there is a question that you get asked more than any other question out there. And I'm going to put you on the spot off script right now. Al, for everybody that's in the room or might watch this, why don't you hunt whitetail anymore?
It's a great question. And I think I've been asked 10 times today at least. 10 times today at least, so I'm going to tell you all why, so hopefully I don't have to answer it 10 times all down the road. In the early 90s, I think 93, an old football injury come back to haunt me, and I had to have an ankle fused. Well, I got the ankle fused, and it was only supposed to be like a 4-month healing process. Well, it didn't work, and they had to do it again. So I was off of work and in a boot or crutches for a year. So that took care of that season, and there was no way I could hunt. I just couldn't. So the next season I was ready to go, had my stands in place, everything ready, had 2 weeks before gun season on vacation. I'd been out a little bit hunting, but not much. The day that I was starting my vacation, my nephew was 26 years old. He's an only child. And we had become really close over the years, but the year before, while I didn't hunt, I fished with him a lot. So, and I duck hunted with him. He wanted me to duck hunt, and I never would during deer season, so we duck hunted a lot. Had a blast with him. The first day after I'd missed that first year, that 1 year of hunting, the first day of my vacation, he drowned duck hunting. And for the next 2 weeks, the lake was 2 hours away from home, so my vacation, I went up for the family, because his mom and dad couldn't. I went up for the family, and I helped the DNR drag and look for my nephew, and we didn't find him. So that kind of took the sails out of me for my second year. I just didn't feel like I wanted to shoot a big deer with that hanging over the family and his family, and where would be the joy in it? At that time also, they found, by the way, he finally surfaced in April, so we got to put him to rest, and thank you, Lord, for that. But while I was doing that and with Nathan, muskies started showing up in the lake I was fished all the time, and I really got hooked on fishing muskies. I mean, I was having a blast with them. So I was fishing all the time, and while I was off those 2 years, I lost a couple of my best properties to guys, moving in while Al was gone, or however you want to put it. And at the same time, the DNR was wise enough that they opened up the Illinois season. You could shoot $5 in a season. Now, when you're a trophy hunter and that comes out, it's like, for Pete's sake. And I was fed up with it, and I was having so much fun muskie fishing, and I could fish for them all the time. And I'd killed some big deer, and I'd never caught a big muskie, so I just hung up my bow and I went fishing, and that's why.
Don,
I still love the big deer. I've got Don. I've got buddies that keep me informed. I love all of that stuff. I like keeping a pulse on the sport. But I just don't have the desire to shoot one myself anymore, and I hope all you guys get that chance someday.
And you love chasing those long-beard turkeys, don't you? Hey, Don, as you look at your mentor and your friend that took years off of your journey, you've mentioned several times that the relationships, that hunting is what's the most important to you. How did you take this transition and change of direction from the guy who taught you so much, stepping away from the sport and supporting him and encouraging him through that process?
Well, it was really, I couldn't understand it. I was young at the time. I mean, I was probably in my 20s still, wasn't I? Maybe 30? Yeah, well, I wouldn't have turned 30 till 93. So, I'm just a kid still, really. And I didn't understand it because deer hunting was such a passion to me, and I thought Al was the same way, and I just couldn't imagine giving it up. And to be honest, I had my priorities out of order at that stage of my life, and Al had his in much better order. I know that his family was very important to him, is to this day. And for me at that time, deer hunting was it. It was number one, and I just couldn't understand it. But, Al remained a good friend, even though he wasn't sharing deer stories with me because he wasn't in the woods. I would bounce ideas off of him when I was in the woods and come back, and I'd say, hey, Al, there's this buck I'm chasing, blah, blah, blah. And he would give me ideas, and I think he really kind of continued his deer hunting through me. And the thing of it is, that's been 30 years ago now that you walked away from deer hunting, and our friendship is stronger today than it was back when we were both deer hunting. And I've said it many times, the best thing deer hunting ever did for me was the people that it brought into my lives. And there's a lot of them right here in this room right now, and on this stage as well. You're one of them, Terry. Deer hunting brought us together, and we can go right down the stage here. So, when it happened, it was very tough for me to understand. But today, I totally respect Al's decision, and like I said, we're closer today than we've ever been.
Well, we're going to transition to our second segment and start with you, Al, because this is probably one of the things, when we have a master class at Don's house, you and I usually sit in the back and we're cutting up or taking naps, one of the two. We do that sometimes in the back of the room. But one of the things you talk about is slicing the pie, or the slices of the pie, as we're talking about wind and using the wind and how we hunt and what a buck wants. And this is, I think, one of the things that you talk to Don, and he talks about it all the time, shaving the years off. So when we really talk about using the wind and what the buck is doing, I know it's difficult without a visual, but can you explain what a mature buck is looking for in the wind as he goes about his normal day?
Well, I'd say his nose is to him is probably more important or as important as our eyes are to us. And everything he does revolves around his use of the wind. And to me, I learned through trial and error that what worked best for me was to learn how the buck moved through his areas, how he used terrain to go through his areas, and how he used the wind when he used the terrain, because they're all tied together. He doesn't go anywhere without using the wind somehow. A lot of guys say, well, I see them with their nose, the wind behind them all the time. Well, yeah, you do, but how often do you kill them doing that? And also, a lot of times you don't know where he was at before you saw him. So they do scent check, But I just worked at figuring the buck's going to use the wind, so I've got to figure out how to hunt him and let him use the wind the way he wants, and then get in the spot where I can take advantage of that, letting him move naturally. I mean, I just learned that, you got to get off that scent path enough where he can still use the wind, but he's not catching you. And that's when I wrote an article called The Weak Spot, and I think it was probably the best article I ever read. And a buck moves, he can't use the wind to his advantage all the time. He's got to take shortcuts, he's got to jog here, he's got to jog there. That's where you can kill him. You got to use those plots, let him use the wind the way he wants it, and just be just off enough that you can get him in that 15, 18 yards, and you can put an arrow in him. Don't hunt a big buck expecting him to make a mistake. That's not how you consistently kill big bucks. If you're hunting him waiting for him to make a mistake, you're going to be waiting a long time. You're not going to have a wall full of them. You might have one or two. But hunt him the way he's moving, and use your own hunting ability and figure things out, and let him move naturally and take advantage of that. And I think it'll help how you kill a deer.
I want to go back to Gene on this, because this was one of the first topics I, as a young hunter, heard you and Barry talking about. So let's start with you on the same topic.
Do we have enough time for me to get in there too?
Yeah, you can talk too. We'll start with Gene and then go to you, Barry.
I feel like all deer, all whitetails, pay attention to the wind, but not all of them learn how to use it. It's something that, especially the older a buck gets, the more mature more mature he gets. And some of the smartest, I say smartest, I'm not talking intelligent, but some of the sharpest deer in the woods are old does that raise 3-4 sets of fawns. And those babies, they understand how to use the wind, or they wouldn't have got that old. Same with bucks. If they're dumb bucks, they ain't gonna make it, at least when there's guns in the area. But these deer that learn how to use the wind, and they wait for the wind, or they'll get to a point where I've never really, and I've disagreed with Barry about this for quite a few years, but I really don't think whitetails have the ability to reason up to a point. Very much, it's instinct more than it is, when a buck comes up to a fork in a trail and the wind's, do I take the left fork or the right fork? They don't reason, I better take the left fork, the wind's coming out of the west, whatever. I mean, they don't reason, but they make, the older the deer, and especially the bucks, the fewer mistakes they make, and the more they trust, or they trust their noses and they distrust the chancy or the poor winds, or I say that's not the right term for it. I can't think of it the right word, but they don't want to take risks. But those deer that learn how to use the wind, they're the smartest, male or female. They're the smartest deer in the woods.
I say they're almost like a separate species. Meaning, I've always said, you got deer hunters, you got buck hunters, and you got trophy buck hunters. As a buck ages, I don't classify a buck fully mature until he's 5.5 years old. When he is that age bracket, he almost has to be hunted as a separate species. And I use this example, whereas hot air, thermal air, hot air rises. Physics. Hot air rises, And because deer are a prey animal, they'll tend to bed up high on the or higher up on the mountain, and then they have those warm air currents coming up, thermals coming up in their faces all day. All right. In the afternoon, the herd, the general, the does and the fawns and the immature bucks will get up from their bed, and they'll start to descend the mountain to the food sources and stuff with the thermal air at their face and so forth. The big buck is a total 100% different critter. He will remain bedded up atop of the mountain until dethermalization, the sun goes down, starts to cool it, and the thermals that were going up the mountain will reverse and start to come down the mountain. Then he will get up from his bed and he'll start to descend the mountain. People will say, well, why would he do that? Because then he can't smell, what's in front of him, behind him, and stuff like that. Well, the reason he's doing that is because he's got the wind at his back. He's got the rest of the herd at the base of that mountain out in the food source acting as decoys. That's the exact reason that he's the last one to enter the field just before dark, etc. The exact same is true in the morning. Opposite is true in the morning. Often the rest of the herd is still out there in that food source feeding. It's still dark out, and he'll start to ascend the mountain, head uphill to the bedding area, to where he's got the descending thermal currents coming down in his face. He's got the rest of the herd covering his back door. It's brilliant type of thing, and it goes over all of our heads because, every move that mature buck makes is almost totally dependent on messages that they receive from their nose, eyes, ears, and nose, but mostly their nose.
I gotta add something. That whole spiel he just went through, Barry, this is the Midwest. There are no mountains. He's up the mountain.
Okay,
down
never
the
mind.
Don, this next question is for you, and I'm going to ask a couple guys to chime in after you. And I'm actually interested in your answer because out of all the years we've been around each other, I don't know the answer to this. So the question is, describe the light bulb moment or period in your hunting career where you thought was a turning point of understanding mature bucks.
There's two, really. I described earlier in the introduction where the season after I'd met Al, my buck sightings from a stand tripled. And all the lessons that he taught me was about the wind. So that was a turning point. But a big light bulb moment came, it was roughly about the same time, actually. So in my late teens, I was really big into trapping. And about this same time, four-wheel ATVs became popular. They came out. Before that, we had the three-wheelers, the Honda Big Reds and such. But the four-wheel ATVs came out, and I thought, man, this is just the ticket for trapping. Man, I can put all my gear on this, and I can cover a lot of territory. And so I got one, and I covered a lot of territory. And what I discovered was I was jumping these mature bucks out in the most remote places. A little, a patch of foxtail in the corner of a field a mile from the woods. I'd be out there setting a trap for a fox or a coyote, and boom, a mature buck jumps up and runs across the countryside. And it just happened over and over and over. And yet, when I would go hunting in traditional deer-type cover, I was not encountering these mature bucks. And it didn't have to happen too many times before the light bulb went off, and it's like, I'm hunting the wrong spot. These bucks they're not spending their daylight hours where I'm trying to hunt them. They're leaving sign there. They're coming in there at night. They're leaving scrapes and rubs, and we didn't have trail cameras at that time, but even today you could relate to it. They're leaving those nighttime trail camera photos and such. And, I just realized that if I'm going to kill these kind of bucks, I'm going to have to start hunting them in different places. And when I start hunting those small out-of-the-way patches, it's not easy to do, especially once the foliage is off of the trees. But you come in before daylight, an hour before daylight, and you beat that buck there, you can do it. But just realizing that buck sign is not necessarily the key to killing those deer, at least in farm country. Because they leave that sign all night long when they're running the countryside and are on their feet. But when that sun comes up, those deer are going to be where they feel the safest. And I tell my consulting clients all the time, if you want to kill big deer consistently, you got to hunt them on the property where they spend their daylight hours, where they bed. The first thing I look for on every property I consult on is we got to create a bedding sanctuary. We got to get the bucks in your area bedded right there on your property. If we get them bedded there and keep them bedded there because we're not intruding into it, we can kill them in the course of a season. That doesn't mean we can go in there in 1 week and kill our target buck. But if we keep him bedded on our property, in the course of a whole season, he's going to mess up and he's going to come by one of our stands on the edge of that sanctuary. So, buying that ATV, trapping, covering that open territory was a light bulb moment.
All right. Well, I'm going to have to make the call due to time to move to the next question. And we know we're going to burn some up on this because it's Joe's first one that they wrote down for you. And I'm just telling you, man, you might have to answer this with an interpretive dance instead of an answer. So back to technology, we're going to go to the question, mechanical or expandable broadheads. What's your go-to and why? But more importantly, don't stop at the broadhead itself, but the arrow. Because I think that's something that we get too focused on the head and not the whole setup. So you might need to get up in front and present this in a...
Gene, can I trade seats with you because I'm liable to get hit when I start talking about these broadheads? I'll just stay here. Don, you're going to be real happy. I got a new one I'm shooting this year. It's the Penetrator 4000. It's got bat wings that come out on it. It's an 8-inch cutting diameter. It's got 4 leaf springs that hold the blades in place. They pivot up and down.
Well, I know a guy with a good tracking dog. I'll give you his number.
So, yeah, mechanical broadheads. I'm probably the only guy on stage that shoots them. Reasons for it, I've shot a lot of stuff over the years. I've tested a ton of gear, and I totally understand why guys shoot fixed blade heads. They do not want any type of mechanical failure. I understand it. But I don't think failure stops with mechanical. I think you can get failure with accuracy. You can get failure with wind. You can get failure with noise. You can get failure with cutting diameter. There are other ways that broadheads can fail other than a mechanical failure. I agree, the first mechanicals that came out were absolute junk. The first Rages that came out, the first Jackhammers, they were awful, terrible. But like everything else, over years, technology has improved, and there are a couple mechanicals nowadays that are very deadly, and personally, I want the most lethal setup for whitetail deer that I can have, and I feel like the mechanical broadhead, especially the Rage Tri-Pan, is going to give me the best advantage. There's a reason why the Mega Meat, it's a G5 3-blade mechanical, is the #1 selling broadhead in North America, and people argue it's because of marketing. Well, G5 is owned by a very small family. They don't have huge marketing dollars. They make a really good broadhead that's been around 5 years. And if they had failed over and over and over again for 5 years, there's no way they'd be the #1 selling broadhead on the market. So again, everybody on this stage wants to be successful and takes deer hunting as serious as anybody on the planet, and they're not going to use any piece of equipment that's going to give them a disadvantage. And I respect that. I understand that. It's a difference of opinion. It's a difference of what guys are confident in shooting. We get into the arrows, and that's where I have, for whitetail deer, a real concern with the way the pendulum has kind of shifted to this super heavy arrow setup that we're seeing nowadays. And I've done a tremendous amount of testing on a 450 grain arrow, versus a 650 grain arrow. Not talking about traditional stuff, because you guys are in a whole different world. We're talking about modern compound bows and the energy those bows generate. And in all of my testing, I have not found anywhere that a 650 grain arrow penetrates that much better than a 450 grain arrow shot out of the exact same bow. Now, I know the Newton laws and everything else talk about the heavier arrow penetrating better, and the math supports that, but it's not significant enough on the loss of speed you have of that arrow getting to the animal and the trajectory that you have of a more moderate 450 grain arrow. The trajectory is much flatter shooting, and when we're in timber trying to shoot over limbs and under limbs, that 450 grain arrow has plenty of penetration for a whitetail deer, and it also is a lot faster getting to target. We talked about deer jumping strings and moving out of the way. You can't tell me that an arrow that gets to a deer 50 feet per second faster than another one can't help with the way the deer jumps a string. And the penetrating factor is not that much better, and the trajectory of that moderate weight arrow, that 450 to 500 grain arrow, gives you an ability to shoot through holes and over and under limbs that you can't get with a big arcing arrow that's going through the timber. So fixed blade heads, I completely understand why guys shoot them. I respect that. I can't get on board with the heavy arrow stuff for whitetail hunting. So that's my stance.
You have a lot of content that you've created over the years that go along with that. So if you want to learn more about that, we're going to have to move on to the future segment. And we're going to deviate from our script a little bit because I think it's so important with the group that's on this stage to talk about the future of deer hunting. So even though we're going to go off script a little bit, I'm going to read a question, and I want us to go around the panel here, and each of us take about 2 minutes just to talk about this question, okay? Each of us are going to get a time to answer this, but what is your biggest concern with where you see the hunting industry trending today? I'll start with you.
Again, talking about hunting as an instinct. I mean, you go back to caveman. You go in a cave and they don't have pictures of salads on the wall. You know, it's about making meat, you know, and eating meat. And here again, I know, I hate to admit this, but I know a lot of guys that are hunting for the wrong reasons. And it's hard to look them in the eye and tell them that, but especially these youngsters, you know, they're skipping, like I said, they're skipping the apprenticeship. And I think that one of the most important things we can do is get them in the woods. Anyways, I'll take it from, you know, it's somebody else's turn, but that's 2 minutes.
I'll continue where he left off. Basically, the same answer is the kids. I am most concerned about the youth of today, for us not planting the seed. And in other words, I want to make it fun for them, take them out in the woods and explain things, show them the woodsmanship skills, so they understand what's going on, and that they can go out, and the more you put into the sport, the more you'll get out of it. And if we don't, it's our fault. If we don't plant that seed, that our sport's going to die, I mean, eventually.
Bobby?
Woodsmanship, teaching them woodsmanship. Fellas, the biggest enjoyment we get out of hunting is going out in the woods, reading the sign, and figuring that buck out and outsmarting him. Some of the greatest pleasures in earth are learning and achieving something. These kids you put out in a box blind and shooting a deer in a food plot, or shooting a deer over bait, and adults too, all they're hunting for is bragging rights. They take a big rack and they show their friends and buddies and they brag on it. Well, fellas, that's not a lot of self-satisfaction. That won't last forever. Finally, the guy says, yeah, I've seen more others like that you've killed, and he might even say you're hunting over bait or whatever. But that is not the kind of long-term achievement and true pleasure that a kid can get and enjoy. He don't feel like he's outsmarted the deer. You're missing like Gene said, the apprenticeship of it. And they're hunting for the wrong reason, and hunting for bragging rights will only last so long. But if you learn to hunt because, hey, I'm learning something, and hey, I'm outsmarting this deer, then that will stick for that person forever. They will stick with the sport of hunting, and I think that's why so many's dropping out. A lot of people think it's just because of the cell phones and other things, and that's part of it. But I think a big part of it is they start hunting, but they don't learn woodsmanship, they don't learn how to outsmart the deer, and they're not really learning anything other than how to pull the trigger, and that's not going to hold them into the sport.
Al, how about you? What's your biggest concern after stepping away from 30 years and looking from the outside, observing your friends and your family still hunting? What's your biggest concern for the industry?
Well, I'm still a hunter, and I'm still a fisherman, and I'm still a big buck guy at heart. It's a hard question. Social media is taking so much away from our children. I mean, they live on these phones. They're not getting out in the woods. They're not fishing unless parents take them. A lot of times, middle-aged parents don't even know how to do it. I don't know a good answer to that, but other than you've got to get your kids out in the woods, you've got to get them fishing. Let them be kids. Let them have fun. Don't put pressure on them to succeed. Don't put pressure on them to kill a big deer right off the bat. Just let them go out and have fun. I've got a granddaughter that she's in multiple sports and things like that, and everything's about achieve. And I talked to my daughter one time about it, and I says, let her have fun too. Let her be a little girl. And my daughter, her husband was like, flip the switch. And, it works. But you got to get them outside, and you got to get them away from this social media stuff. And that's a hard one I don't have a good answer to how to do that other than you just got to, tough love maybe. Get them away from the phone and get them outside and get them doing things and showing them there's more to it than the social media stuff.
How about you, Don?
Two concerns about the future of bow hunting. First of all, the hunting industry lacks good role models today. I had the Wensel brothers when I was a teenager in my early 20s. These aren't guys that are preaching kill, kill, kill. They're not posting pictures of bloody, gory mess deer after they shoot them in the back of a pickup truck. I learned ethics, and I don't see that available to young hunters today. In fact, I've made a point of complimenting hunters that take good pictures. And a time or two, I've made negative comments on some pretty disgusting pictures. And when I make those comments, I get lambasted because all I'm trying to do is set a good example. So the lack of good role models today for the youth that I had, that the youth today don't have, it concerns me. The other thing is hunting is becoming a rich man's game, and there's just no denying that. Access to land, hunting land is being bought up and leased at a rate we've never seen before. It's just so expensive for a young person to get into it. If their family is not born with land, we're about a generation away from those people not ever being able to hunt. Public land is so crowded, it's not an enjoyable experience. But that's the two things, the lack of role models and hunting becoming a rich man's sport that concern me.
How about you, Joe?
Yeah, my biggest concern is the lost art, the lost craft that these guys have. The craft and Don, you and I hadn't spent a ton of time in the woods, but I got to spend a lot of time with Bobby in the woods, and the craft and actual real skill is it is an art. It is an absolute art, and that's my concern, is that's going to get lost, because if you look at anything in the youth today, it is instant gratification. Johnny has to get a trophy. Johnny has to do this. Johnny's got to have the newest shoes. Johnny's got to kill the buck the first time he goes and sits in the stand over the corn pile or whatever it may be. And my biggest concern is that art that these gentlemen right here have is lost. And getting to spend time with these guys and trying to pass that on is so, so vitally important. So that's my concern.
You know, an overwhelming theme to what we've talked about tonight is woodsmanship. You know, you guys talked about it, Bobby talked about it, Joe just wrapped up with it. If you had an apprentice, we got to do this fast. If you guys had an apprentice that was going to follow you in the 2024 deer season, to be that woodsman, where do you start that apprentice with you? Real quick, let's just go around. What thing do you put him in front of to learn the basic foundation of woodsmanship?
First of all, it would depend on what time of year it is to teach a guy. I mean,
You have him all year.
I hate to say it, but spring and summer don't cut it for me anyway. If I'm gonna, I would rather get a guy in the woods or an apprentice, as you call it, in the woods when the deer are acting like deer. You know, when they're starting. I think, to be honest with you, the best time to kill a buck, and this is a little off the subject, but I really feel like it's in October more than November. You know, anymore anyway. And but bucks act like bucks the way they're supposed to act. They're just being bucks. But taking these people out and look at the ground and ask yourself, or I would tell this person, ask yourself questions and try and answer them. And if you don't know the answer, when you see sign in the woods, deer sign, interpret it or ask yourself. That's how Barry and I learned. You know, there wasn't books and DVDs and all that sort of thing out there, other than parents, you know, dad or whatever. But we would go in the woods and ask, "What's going on here? You know, what's going on here?" With, and I'm going to do a seminar tomorrow, by the way, about scrapes and scrape hunting. And to be honest with you, I think, and I was guilty of this because I started talking about, I wrote my first book in 1979, and a lot of the stuff I put in that book were theory, and a lot of it was wrong. And in the last few years, I'm changing my mind on why scrapes, what is the function of a scrape, and how it's used. Anyway, I'll get into that tomorrow, but I guess my point is getting somebody and have them look at the ground and ask themselves questions and then ask me, get them on the right track.
Yeah, I'm going to make it real quick, but my input as far as the youth, et cetera, I ran a whitetail school for 15 years. I called it a boot camp, and basically it was a 3-day all-inclusive session. The first day I lectured all day long. The next 2 days I actually took the attendees out in the woods. I showed them my own personal tree stands. I explained to them why they worked, when I hunted them, how I hunted them, etc. And I had so many I started it for the youth, etc. But I had so many young guys say I was that far. But the fact that I took them by the hand and pointed stuff out, that all of a sudden the light went on their head, like, why didn't I think of that? They went 95% of the way, but they just didn't finish it. So that's what I would do. I would take a younger hunter out and slow down and point things out and teach them what to look for.
Bobby, how do you start a young guy at the basic step of woodsmanship?
Well, I wouldn't get the cart before the horse. First, I'd get that child away from his parents and make sure he wanted to be a hunter. So many times, listen to me, parents, your passion is not necessarily your child's passion. And if your child does not have passion for hunting, then don't push it. I coach archery, and so many great adult archers bring their child to me, and they want that child to be a great archer. And you can tell that child hates being there, but they don't want to disappoint their parents. And their parents try to relive their enjoyment of the archery and their success that they had when they was younger through their child. And they push child through football or basketball or archery or whatever, and that child just absolutely miserable. And that type child will not pay attention because they don't have the passion. And I've seen children go plumb through high school miserable what they was doing because they didn't want to disappoint their families. So your passion is not necessarily your child's passion. But when the child has the passion, and I get it by itself, and he tells me he's got the passion, then I would take it to a state park or somewhere where there's a lot of deer, somewhere it's illegal to hunt, and I'd make sure I had permission, and I'd take them where we could experience a lot of rubs and a lot of strapes and a lot of deer tracks. And I'd show them how the deer use the terrain, and show them how they use strapes and why they make strapes and why they make rubs. And I'd take them where, not in a place where maybe you hunt that hadn't got a whole lot of deer. It'd take them 2 days to experience what you could experience maybe in a half a day in a place that has a whole lot of deer. So I'd take them out and let them show them sign and tell them what the sign's all about. I'd take them in a place where there's a lot of game.
That's fantastic advice. We're going to finish up here. I want you guys, if you feel that you've experienced something special with the advice and knowledge over this period of time tonight, give these guys a round of applause. You know, after we dismiss this, these guys are going to go back to their booths. And I can tell you one thing, this is my challenge to you all, and this was my goal tonight. I wish we could go on for another hour and a half and pick these guys' brains more. But I can tell you there's books in their booths. There's open scheduled for consulting visits. By the time these guys leave tomorrow, there should not be one book left in inventory or one open slot on a consulting schedule, because you guys need to surround and learn this stuff like a sponge, okay? But before we leave tonight, we got a giveaway thanks to Asio Gear. We're going to draw a name. You all had to pick up, I believe, a ticket in the Cloverleaf booth and bring it in and drop it in. And Joe's going to pick a winner. And while he do that, I'm going to ask you all to put your mics down and stand up here with me. Go ahead and pick a winner. The winner has to be here. Read that name off. Jesse Fisher. Is Jesse Fisher in the room? All right, you need to go to the Asio booth after we're done and hook up with Joe, and we'll take care of that, okay? All right, thanks to Asio for doing that. Guys, I want to thank FAE for sponsoring the Midwest Classic, Cloverleaf for sponsoring. This is a historic moment, and I hope that we as a group, along with the promoters of this event, gave you a taste of truly what the pioneers and fundamental pathway builders for understanding mature whitetail have done. We also going to have tickets for the Lester's Feet raffle. They're going to be available in the Brenton Firearms booth, the Gingrich Tree Farm booth, the Lester's Feet booth, and I believe also in the Cloverleaf booth. So that way when you all leave here, you're not all jam-packed. Please go out and visit our vendors that have set up shop. They're waiting for you all to go out there right now. But the most important thing at the night, I'm going to ask all of us to stand and remove our hats. We're going to go to the Lord in prayer and thank Him for this awesome opportunity to get together and learn. Father God, we thank you, we praise you, and we honor you through all things that we do. We pray that everyone here tonight came with some type of open mind to learn something from the legends who really took this activity of hunting to another level. As we continue whatever part of our journey that we're in, whether we're just starting or whether we're a trophy hunter or whether we're a fisherman, or maybe we just want to mentor another young person in the outdoors, I pray that the advice and the knowledge of the men that are on this stage will be helpful in ministering and encouraging and witnessing future generations for years to come. Father, I pray for all these people in the room tonight. A lot of people have traveled from so far away. Give them safety as they go back home tonight. And we pray for those who are sick, whether they're with the Lester's Feet organization or other organizations that are helping them. Father, we pray that in all things we do, we are inspired to serve others. We're inspired to glorify you. And most of all of us here, thank you for sending your son Jesus to die on the cross for our sins. We praise you, honor you, and love you. In your name we pray. Amen. Thanks, everybody. We can't see anything. Tell us when you're ready.